the Bible is what's called laconic, is that it doesn't give information sometimes and fill in gaps that we might expect or want it to. And that's where you get all this later rabbinic commentary on the Bible, which is called midrash, where they would ask these kinds of questions, these kinds of Einstein-style questions. But the biblical text very often does not give us much information at all. So,
well,
you know,
at the core, sorry, did I just interrupt you, Nick?
No, absolutely not. Go ahead, Cyndi.
At the core of like untangling some of those issues is also to recognize that marriage served a different function in the ancient Near East than marriage does today. And family life was structured differently, had different values than family life does today. So it would be hard in that conversation of what Moses, like, did he have time for his family? It presupposes a modern day version of what family and marriage is like, which they're not equal. Plus, we have so many gaps in the narrative. I mean, 40 years wandering in the wilderness, like certainly there was
maybe
time
he did have time
with people, you know.
That's a good point. Kind of on that note, let me throw out another question, and I'll just keep feeding questions to the panel because there's so many. If Job was blessed with twice what he had lost, why wasn't he blessed with 20 more children instead of 10? I think the numbers are a little different in Job, if I remember. But anyway, the point is there. Who was the mother of his second set of children? So I think that this, again, raises a kind of issue of how to read the text. I don't know if anyone has any thoughts on this, but my thoughts would just be picking up on what Nick was saying. A lot of things are not outlined in the text that are written for a different purpose. And so when it says that he received a double blessing or something like that, it's not saying everything was exactly 2 times in a mathematical sense. It's describing the relationship and the, if you will, reward or recompense, or just blessing maybe is a better way to put it, because it doesn't take away what happened to him, but the blessing that he received from God. And the story is written to illustrate something about the nature of humanity, the nature of human relationships, truth and appearance, the nature of God and other supernatural beings. So I think the point of the story is really not the specific, multiplication at the end of the tale. That's how I would look at it. I don't know if anyone else has any thoughts on that.
No, just thinking out loud, and I'm sure probably half of our attendants will probably crucify me after I say this, but do we even know that this is a literal story? Could this be a parable? Could this be a parable? Because parable, people say, oh, parable is not true, but the physical story, literal story is true. No, it's not necessarily. The parable could also be very, very true, although it may have not been the actually a literal happening at some time. And look, I don't know. I don't know exactly how to read this oldest book of the Bible. Job is one of my favorite books. I love it. I love it. It's there's so much that can be said about this. But this is exactly what I'm saying. Is like, I think what we pointing out is that sometimes we assume things. There was I think it was a German theologian a long time ago who said that very often, I quote him in one of my books, but I forget his name. I can't recall it right now. It's also late for me, so I'm like really a little bit tired today. But he said that that we're often blinded, not by the things that we don't know, but by the things we think we know. Okay, and this whole approach to how we seek to interpret the Bible so often is based on so many presumptions that are not verified at all. Sometimes they're not verifiable, but sometimes we didn't bother to verify them. So we hold the Bible, we ask the kind of question that we haven't checked our presuppositions to at first. But I wanted to, Shia, mention one thing about this commitment to God and the mission too much over the family kind of thing. I was wondering, at some point I worked through the book of Genesis, and I cried through a lot of this text. I really did. I mean, I walked very, very slowly, and just, it was a very emotional journey for me. And when when Sarah told Abram to take Hagar and his child and to essentially leave them in the wilderness with some extra money on the way, you know, it's an extremely painful story, and one wonders how Abraham at all survived this trauma. He personally, not forget about other people involved who are greater survivors, of course, but how all of that worked. You know, when he went to sacrifice Isaac, did he tell his mother? I doubt it. You know, you know, I do recall the story from a much more modern history. I was in the seminary at the time, and at the time there was a lesson about the study of John Calvin. I don't know if you like John Calvin, you hate John Calvin, doesn't really matter. But the point is, at some point he was quite a significant leader in Geneva, a Protestant leader in Geneva, and he was so engrossed into theological work and in the work of his seminary that trained enormous amount of missionaries in largely Catholic Europe that were murdered in cold blood all over the place at the time. That his wife, before she died, she grabbed him like this, and she made him swear by God that he will take care of the kids. You know, it's the kind of thing that we kind of go like, oh no, you know, if he's such a good theologian, such a good doesn't he know that you don't abandon the kids? But the truth is that people that are in history revolutionaries, or if they are or they're startup businessmen, you know, I mean, read Steve Jobs, from what I understand, he was a horrible father, you know, and sometimes to be able to get something big like Apple going, unfortunately, you have this. You shouldn't do this. You should never choose the company over the children. This is not what I'm saying, but I'm saying it happens so often in business, and sometimes it's just the issue of you're getting too focused on something. Could you neglect your children? Of course you can. That happens all the time.
You know, going back to the story of Moses and his wife, it was his father-in-law who finally sat him down at a certain point and said, you know, you need to delegate some of the responsibility. You can't wear yourself out this way. You're getting too personally involved in every single question. So that goes with what you're saying. And Eli, thank you for raising the issue of Job. I was hesitating about whether to open this can of worms or not, but I think it's good that you did.
They only think I'm a heretic here.
Well, yeah, I'll leave the question of heresy aside, I guess, because the origin of I won't, I suppose I'll say a comment or two about it. The origin of the idea of heresy is that you choose what you believe rather than accepting what a religious authority tells you to believe. And so this also comes along with the historical development of official religions, you know, and where they set what you have to believe. So that's a problematic concept. And it's, again, one that we can conveniently, for our purposes, sort of set aside because we want to look at the more original biblical context and text, which to a large extent predates those concepts of orthodoxy and heresy in whatever religion. But I was glad that you raised this issue, Eli, because a book like Job, it doesn't tell us what it is. It doesn't tell us if it's a fictional story. It doesn't tell us if it's a morality play. It doesn't tell us if it's an account of actual events. So then people just develop traditions later on about what it is. And some of these things get kind of ossified. They seem to be set in stone in whatever traditional mindset you have. And there are many viewpoints like that. And I think today, just to sum up, I guess, my thought on this, today there are many people who come out of religious backgrounds, whether Jewish or Christian or other, who've been told, you know, this is the way things are for a very long time. And they don't want to just, you know, reject all of that because they feel strongly about it. They have a faith relationship, or however you want to describe it. But there are new questions that are opening up nowadays, where people realize, well, maybe just these sort of traditions that seem to come out of thin air, even though they've been passed on for centuries, maybe they're not all 100% correct. Maybe we can look at things a little bit differently while still maintaining our strong connection to these biblical texts. So now I'm marked as a heretic too, for anyone who put you in that category, Ellie. But I think it's worth mentioning that. And so now we have a trio of questions from Gabi in the UK.
So I think that, hold on, I think there was a part of that we didn't hit. So
did we not?
there's some question about Job's wife. Who was the woman?
Who was his, I guess, who was his second wife? Or
Yeah, I don't know that
who gave him did he have another wife?
I don't think he had another wife, right? I mean, his wife talks to him at the beginning in chapter 2, and then she's sort of mentioned a couple other times, but it's not like she dies. I mean, I don't think the text says that they get divorced or anything. So I think it's the same woman as at the outset of the text.
Could well be. Yeah, could well be. Could be that, like Cyndi was saying, there was a different conception then where they, wouldn't necessarily assume one wife.
Yeah,
if
no,
one is
definitely
mentioned in the
not.
story,
Yeah.
but yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
But
Let's
hold on, just folks, refresh my memory. It's been a while that I actually reread Job, but he loses his children, right?
yes,
And that's the point is that he gets more, right?
right. God restores his children and his fortunes.
I mean, think about this for a second. Like for me, personally for me, this is no argument. The fact that God would give me more kids, the fact that I would lose any of my kids at all,
right?
It's just like I wonder if we're paying attention to the wrong thing here, I remember saying, listen, look, one of the hardest thing at all, I think, I'm terrified. I have 4 kids of my own and 1 adopted. Okay, so I'm terrified of a thought that one of these days, one of my kids serving in the Israeli army, that I'll get a phone call or something like this. This is, I cannot, I mean, it's hard enough to bury your parents, but to bury your children, it's, to me, this is like the ultimate pain. Okay, to me. At some point, one of the most powerful books I've ever read was a book by he was a Yale professor at the time. His name is Nicholas Wolterstorff. I think it's called Lament for a Son. He talks about how he got a phone call that his son, who was like on the height of his career, died in the mount climbing accident. And in anyways, just the pain that he's going through this. I wonder if we read the book of Job, remember the suffering, and we're very, very quickly going, and maybe in the ancient times, it's actually okay, Cyndi, back to your comment about like, well, the family played a different role back then. And today I'm reading the book of Job in my social location. Like I cannot get over, I don't care how many more kids he had more. Did he have 10 or did he have 20 or 30? It doesn't really matter to me after all, because I'm reading this differently. Maybe back then, whenever the book of Job was actually authored, maybe it was the matter of how many people you have to protect your clan, how many people you have in your little army, right, to defend from the neighbors. I don't know. I mean, but those are the kinds of questions that I think from time to time it's good to ask.
I think that's a great comment, Ellie. And in terms of, the sentiments and feelings that people had, they could be very similar or the same to ours as well. The social context changes for sure, but humans are basically the same in most times and places. And if you think of the story of Jacob, for example, and his feelings about his sons Joseph and Benjamin, he wouldn't have been comforted if they had been, those 2 had been killed and he got 50 more sons. So Ellie, thank you for that reminder, because I think there's a temptation with a seminar like this one to focus on, very specific details that aren't really the key part of the story. The key part of the story of Job is something
Trivia.
very, very different. It's
Okay.
trivia, you're right?
Yeah.
There's no need to focus on trivia when there's this extraordinary presentation in the book of Job about what it means to be a human, what it means to suffer, what it means to respect God, and so forth. So
Can I just
thank
offer
you for
one
that
thing
reminder.
really, really quickly on this? Okay, there's another way to look at this completely. And that is from the perspective of numbers in the Bible and what they mean. So Job has 7 sons and 3 daughters. 7 is the Hebrew number of completeness or perfection. 3 is the number of like a climactic event. Okay, so this is a climactic event because God is blessing Job again. Job has gone through all of that pain and has now come out the other side of it. That's a climactic event. That's what the number of daughters represents. And the number 7 of the sons represents the completion of this trial and that God is completely restoring Job. Now, 10, then 7 plus 10, 7 plus 3 equals 10. 10 is the number of creative power in the Bible. That's why God says, and he said 10 times in Genesis. Cyndi and I were just talking about this, recording a podcast together. And so the point is the numbers are symbolic. God is recreating the life of Job in these 10 children. That's what the biblical numbers are telling you. So if you get your head stuck too much in the historical sands here and quibbling over precise numbers and historical chronology, you're going to miss the theological point that the Bible's trying to make.
Shalom friends, Dr. Eli Lizorkin-Eyzenberg is here for you with great news. Today we introduce our new 7-day tuition-free trial for you to study with Israel Bible Center. That's right, you heard me right. This is 7-day, a whole week of studying before you pay any of tuition at all. You will now be able to see for yourself what is the Certificate in Jewish Context and Culture program. You will get over 45 crash courses on variety of Jewish context and culture topics. You will be granted access to more than 55 roundtable talks with world-leading scholars of Jewish background, of New Testament and the Hebrew Bible. You will truly be surprised at the value you're going to receive from studying at Israel Bible Center. You've got nothing to lose, so go ahead and click on the link, sign up for your 7 free tuition days of trial.